I never expected my niece to save my life over roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. The invitation came 3 days before the dinner. Arthur's voice on the phone was warm, almost apologetic. "Look, Brent, I know things have been tense since Dad passed. Let's just have a normal family meal. No talk about the estate, no lawyers, just us." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. Arthur was my older brother by 3 years, but he'd always carried himself like it was a decade. Broad shoulders, booming laugh, the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even entered it. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the careful one, the one who checked his answers twice and kept his head down. Arthur called me cautious. Others called me passive. I called it surviving. Our father passed away 6 months ago. Complications from pneumonia that turned serious faster than anyone expected. In his will, he named me executor and left me the larger portion of his estate. The house, most of the investments, the business properties. Arthur got a substantial amount too, but not control, not authority. Dad told me why 2 weeks before he passed. His voice was thin but clear. "Brent, your brother loves big gestures and quick decisions. That's fine for some things, but what I've built needs someone who reads the fine print, someone who doesn't get swept up in the moment." I'd nodded, holding his papery hand. "He's going to push you," Dad continued. "He'll make it about family loyalty, about trust. Don't let him confuse those things with legal responsibility." Now, standing on Arthur's front porch with a bottle of wine I'd probably bought at the wrong price point, I tried to push those words away. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe Arthur had accepted things. The door swung open before I could knock. "Brent." Arthur's smile was wide, his hand clapping my shoulder hard enough to make me step sideways. Come in. Marjorie's already here, and dinner's almost ready." The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Arthur had done well for himself. Nice suburban place, 2-car garage, the kind of landscaping that required professional help. His wife had left him 2 years ago, but he'd kept the house in the separation. Lena, their daughter, had chosen to stay with him while finishing community college. I stepped into the hallway. Family photos lined the walls. Most of them featured Arthur front and center, arm around someone's shoulder, grin bright and easy. "Is that Brent?" Mom's voice drifted from the dining room. "Finally!" I found her sitting at the head of the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, like grief had compressed her somehow. Her hair was freshly styled, though, and her lipstick was the same coral shade she'd worn my entire childhood. "Hi, Mom." She offered her cheek, and I kissed it dutifully. "You look thin," she said. It was her standard greeting. "I'm the same weight I've been for 10 years?" She didn't sound convinced. Arthur emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of chicken. Behind him came Lena with a bowl of green beans. She was 19, tall and angular like her mother, with Arthur's dark eyes. She'd always been quiet around me, polite but distant. Tonight she looked pale. "Hey, Uncle Brent," she said softly. "Hi, Lena. How's school?" "Fine." She set the bowl down carefully, not meeting my eyes. "She's doing great," Arthur interjected. "Dean's List again, my smart girl." Lena's jaw tightened slightly, but she said nothing. We settled into our seats. Arthur carved the chicken with theatrical precision, narrating each cut like a cooking show host. Mom smiled indulgently. I sipped water and tried to relax. "So," Arthur said, dropping a piece of chicken onto my plate, "I've been thinking about Dad's properties downtown." "Here we go." "Arthur," Mom said gently, "you said no estate talk tonight." "This isn't estate talk, Ma. This is family planning." He smiled at her, then at me. "Those buildings Dad owned near the waterfront, they're just sitting there. Brent, you're busy with your notary work. You don't have time to manage commercial properties." "I've hired a property manager," I said evenly. "Right, but that's just adding expense. I've been talking to some people, and there's real development potential there. We could flip them, split the profit, everyone wins." I cut into my chicken. Dad wanted those properties held long term. "Dad's gone, Brent." Arthur's voice was still friendly, but something sharp moved beneath it. "Things change. We have to adapt. The will is clear about the management structure. The will is a piece of paper. We're family. We can make better decisions together than some lawyer did on a bad day." Mom shifted uncomfortably. Lena stared at her plate. I took another bite, chewing slowly. This was Arthur's pattern. Start reasonable, frame everything as collaboration, then gradually increase pressure until disagreement felt like betrayal. "Let's just enjoy dinner," I said. Arthur laughed, but it sounded forced. Always so cautious. You know what Dad used to say about you? Brent could turn a yes or no question into a research project. Mom smiled sadly. Your father appreciated thoroughness. He appreciated action, too, Arthur countered. He built those properties by taking risks, not by hiding behind procedure. I set down my fork. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm following his instructions. Instructions from a year ago. He didn't know how the market would shift. He knew exactly what he was doing. Silence settled over the table like dust. Then a new voice entered the conversation. So, Brent, have you met Caleb yet? I looked up. A man I hadn't noticed before stood in the doorway to the kitchen. Mid-40s, sandy hair, expensive casual clothes. He held a glass of wine and wore the easy smile of someone used to smooth-talking their way through rooms. Caleb Moore, Arthur said quickly. Family friend. He's been helping me understand some of the legal stuff around the estate. I kept my expression neutral. I wasn't aware we needed additional legal help. Not legal, Caleb said, moving to an empty chair. Just practical guidance. Arthur wanted someone to review options, make sure nothing falls through the cracks. He extended his hand across the table. I shook it briefly. His grip was firm, but perfunctory. Caleb's been great, Arthur continued. He explained how we could restructure some things to reduce tax burden, consolidate management, streamline everything. Streamline, I repeated. Exactly. Dad's setup was complicated. Probably made sense when he was alive, but now we could simplify. Caleb nodded along. There are definitely opportunities for optimization. I looked at him directly. Are you an attorney? I work in estate planning consultation. That's not what I asked. His smile tightened slightly. I have extensive experience with estate documentation. But you're not licensed to practice law. I facilitate understanding between parties. Translation. He knew enough to be dangerous and not enough to be accountable. Arthur cut in. Brent, you're doing it again, making everything adversarial. Caleb's just trying to help. Help with what, specifically? With paperwork, Arthur said. There are some documents that need signatures. Simple stuff. Transfers of authority, consolidated management agreements, nothing dramatic. Every professional instinct I had started screaming. I'd need to review anything before signing, I said carefully. Of course, Arthur waved his hand. No one's asking you to sign blind. We can go through everything together. Actually, that's part of why I wanted tonight to be casual. Take the pressure off. Let us talk as brothers instead of whatever this has become. I watched his face. He looked earnest, almost hurt. If I didn't know better, I'd think he genuinely just wanted to simplify things. But I'd spent 30 years watching Arthur operate. He was good at making his priorities sound like everyone's priorities. I'll review anything through proper channels, I said. Arthur's expression flickered, just for a second, before the warmth returned. Sure, but think about it, Brent. Do we really need channels between brothers? Between brothers? No. Between executor and heir? Yes. Mom made a small sound of distress. Boys, please. It's fine, Ma, Arthur said, his voice softening. Brent's just being Brent. Careful to a fault, but that's okay. We love him anyway, right? The condescension was expertly packaged as affection. I'd heard variations of this my entire life. Lena suddenly stood up. I need to get something from upstairs. She left quickly, her footsteps rapid on the stairs. Arthur didn't seem to notice. He was leaning back in his chair now, fingers steepled. So, here's what I'm thinking. Next week we sit down properly. You, me, Caleb, maybe Ma if she wants. We go through everything clearly. No surprises, no pressure. Just family making smart decisions together. I have a consultation scheduled with Diane Holloway next week, I said. Holloway? Caleb's eyebrows rose. The estate attorney? Yes. Arthur and Caleb exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Why her? Arthur asked. Because she specializes in complex estate administration. Brent, she's going to charge you a fortune just to tell you what Caleb can explain for free. Professional guidance has value. So does family. We stared at each other across the table. Mom twisted her napkin in her lap. Finally, Arthur smiled and lifted his wine glass. To family, whatever that means these days. I didn't raise my glass. We finished the meal in near silence. Mom tried a few conversational gambits about the weather and the neighbors, but they faded quickly. Caleb excused himself after dessert, shaking hands again with that same professional emptiness. At 9:30, I stood to leave. Already, Arthur said. We barely got to talk. Early morning tomorrow. Always working. He walked me to the door, hand on my shoulder again. Think about what I said, Brent. About sitting down properly. We can figure this out. I nodded noncommittally. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Uncle Brent. Lena appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. She glanced back into the house, then stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. Lena, everything okay? She grabbed my arm, her fingers tight. Her eyes were wide, urgent. Uncle Brent, you're in danger. You need to leave, right now. I froze. What? What are you talking about? Please. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Just trust me. Don't sign anything he gives you. Don't come back here alone. And don't... She glanced at the door again. Don't tell him I said anything. Lena, I don't understand. What's going on? I can't explain right now, but I heard things. Please, just be careful. From inside, Arthur's voice. Lena, who are you talking to? She released my arm and stepped back. Just saying goodbye. She gave me one last desperate look, then disappeared into the house. I stood on the driveway, keys in hand, heart hammering. The night air was cool. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Everything looked normal, but Lena's fear had been real, visceral. Not teenage drama, not exaggeration. Actual terror. I got in my car and drove away, watching Arthur's house shrink in the rearview mirror. Whatever was happening, I just walked away from it without understanding what it was. And somehow, that might have saved everything. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, still wearing the shirt I'd worn to dinner, replaying every word, every gesture, every glance. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Lena's whisper kept looping in my mind. You're in danger. What danger? Legal danger? Financial danger? Or something worse? I got up and made coffee, even though it was past midnight. My hands were steady as I measured grounds and water. That surprised me. I'd expected to be shaking, panicking. Instead, I felt eerily calm, like some part of my brain had clicked into a different mode, professional mode. I'd been a notary for 26 years. People thought it was boring work, witnessing signatures, verifying identities, certifying documents. And most of the time, it was. But occasionally, very occasionally, I saw things, patterns, red flags, the slight hesitation before someone signed their name, the way a family member stood too close, hovering, the document that looked just slightly wrong. I'd learned to trust those instincts. Now those same instincts were screaming about tonight's dinner. I opened my laptop and pulled up the family calendar I'd been keeping since Dad's passing. I'd originally started it to track estate deadlines and filing dates, but I'd also noted other things. Phone calls from Arthur, unexpected visits, messages about catching up, or discussing Dad's wishes. Looking at it now, I saw a pattern I'd been too close to notice before. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, Arthur initiated contact. Usually casual, always with some reference to the estate but framed as concern. Just wondering how you're handling everything. Saw an article about property taxes, made me think of Dad's buildings. We should really sit down soon. Then, 3 months ago, the frequency increased. Weekly contacts, then twice weekly. And a month ago, Caleb's name started appearing. Had coffee with this guy, Caleb, really sharp. Caleb mentioned something interesting about estate restructuring. I'd dismissed it all as Arthur being Arthur. Persistent, boundary-pushing, but ultimately harmless. Now I wasn't sure. I pulled up the email folder where I'd archived messages from Arthur. Most were brief, friendly, nothing overtly suspicious, but as I read them in sequence, I noticed something. The language was getting more specific. Early emails. We should talk about Dad's properties sometime. Middle emails. Those downtown buildings need a decision soon. Recent emails. I've got the paperwork ready, just needs your signature and we can move forward. What paperwork? I'd never agreed to any paperwork. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder containing Dad's will and estate documents. I'd read them dozens of times, but I read them again now, slower, looking for vulnerabilities. Dad had been thorough. He'd assigned me as executor with full authority over asset distribution and management. Arthur was named as secondary heir, but with no management rights. All major decisions required my signature as executor and property owner. In other words, nothing could be transferred, sold, or restructured without me, which meant Arthur needed my cooperation, or my signature without my cooperation. I sat back, coffee growing cold in my hand. That was it, wasn't it? That was the danger Lena had sensed. They weren't just going to ask me to sign something. They were going to create a situation where I felt I had to sign. Pressure, manipulation, maybe even documents that looked legitimate but contained buried clauses I wouldn't notice until too late. and Caleb, unofficial, unlicensed, unaccountable Caleb, would be there to make it all seem normal, professional, just helping the family navigate complicated matters. I thought about Arthur's words at dinner. The will is just a piece of paper. No, the will was a legal instrument. The difference mattered. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the text thread with Arthur, his last message from 3 days ago. Looking forward to Sunday, time to get the family back on track. Get the family back on track. What track? His track, where he called the shots and I signed where indicated. I opened a new note on my phone and started writing down everything I remembered from dinner. The way Caleb had appeared at just the right moment, the casual mention of paperwork, Arthur's insistence on informality, on handling things as brothers instead of through proper channels. Then I made another list, this one titled, Things Arthur has asked me to do since Dad passed. The list grew quickly. Sign temporary management agreements. Transfer certain properties into joint ownership for tax purposes. Authorize Arthur to make decisions about repairs and improvements. Each request had seemed reasonable in isolation. Together they formed a picture of someone systematically trying to gain control. I'd said no to all of them. Politely, carefully, but firmly no. And now Arthur was getting impatient. I looked at the clock. 1:47 in the morning. In 6 hours, I had appointments with 3 clients who needed documents notarized. Routine work, comfortable work. But first, I needed to make a phone call. I pulled up my contacts and found Diane Holloway's number. I'd met her at a professional conference 2 years ago. She'd impressed me with her precision and her refusal to be rushed. Dad had consulted her briefly before his passing, though he'd ultimately worked with his longtime attorney for the actual will. Her voicemail picked up after 4 rings. Professional, concise. Ms. Holloway, this is Brent Trenwick. We met at the Notary Association conference, and my father consulted with you about estate planning last year. I need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible regarding the administration of his estate. It's become urgent. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I hung up and stared at my phone. Urgent. I'd never used that word in a professional context before. I was the person who planned ahead, who built in buffer time, who never rushed. But Lena's fear had been urgent, and Arthur's patience was running out. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. My street was dark, quiet, suburban, and safe. A streetlight cast orange pools on the sidewalk. Nothing moved. How could a family dinner lead to this? But I knew the answer. It hadn't been just the dinner. It had been years of small moments. Arthur testing boundaries, pushing just a little further each time. Me backing down in the name of family harmony. Dad's estate had simply provided focus and stakes. I thought about what Dad had said. He'll make it about family loyalty, about trust. Arthur had done exactly that tonight. Every objection I'd raised, he'd reframed as me being difficult, paranoid, letting lawyers divide the family. But lawyers didn't divide families. Truth divided families. Specifically, the truth about who valued relationships versus who valued control. I finished my coffee, now lukewarm and bitter. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, heart jumping. A text from Arthur. Thanks for coming tonight. Sorry if things got tense. Let's try again next week, just you and me. No Caleb, no agenda, just brothers talking. I stared at the message. It sounded conciliatory, reasonable. The old Brent would have said yes, relieved at the olive branch. The new Brent, the one Lena's warning had activated, saw the trap. Just brothers talking, no witnesses, no professional buffer. Just Arthur's persuasion against my resistance, in a private space where pressure could be applied and words could be denied later. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop again and started a document. I titled it Timeline and Documentation. I began writing down everything. Every conversation I could remember about the estate. Every request Arthur had made. Every time he'd framed legal process as mistrust. Every mention of Caleb, with dates and contexts. I worked until sunrise, filling pages with meticulous detail. Not because I planned to do anything with it yet, but because professionals document. They create records, they build cases. And I was done being passive. At 7:15, my phone rang. Diane Holloway. Mr. Trenwick, I got your message. What's going on? Her voice was calm but alert. I felt something release in my chest. I need advice about protecting estate assets from family pressure, I said. She didn't ask if I was sure. Didn't suggest I was overreacting. Just said, can you come in today at 2? Yes? Bring all estate documents and any communications regarding asset management requests. I will. And Mr. Trenwick, don't sign anything before we talk. I won't. I hung up and looked at my kitchen, golden now with morning light. The coffee maker was still on, the cup still on the table, Everything looked normal. But I wasn't the same person who'd walked into Arthur's house last night. Lena had handed me a gift, a warning, a chance to see clearly before it was too late. I intended to use it. The day stretched like taffy. I moved through appointments on autopilot, a couple refinancing their mortgage, an elderly woman updating her healthcare directive, a college student getting documents notarized for study abroad. I verified identities, witnessed signatures, applied my seal with mechanical precision. But my mind was elsewhere. At 1:45, I parked outside Diane Holloway's office. The building was modern glass and steel, deliberately understated. Her suite was on the 3rd floor, marked with simple bronze lettering. Holloway Estate Law. The reception area was quiet, decorated in whites and pale wood. A young woman at the desk smiled up at me. "Mr. Trenwick, Ms. Holloway is ready for you." Diane's office was exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, organized by subject and then alphabetically. A desk clear of clutter except for a single yellow legal pad and a pen. Windows overlooking a courtyard where someone had planted cherry trees. She stood as I entered. Mid-40s, gray suit, dark hair pulled back. No jewelry except simple studs. Everything about her communicated focus. "Mr. Trenwick, please sit." I sat in one of 2 chairs facing her desk. She took the other chair, not the one behind the desk, a subtle shift that made the conversation feel collaborative rather than hierarchical. "Tell me what's happening," she said. I handed her the folder of estate documents, then pulled out my phone with the timeline I'd created. My father passed 6 months ago, named me executor and primary heir. My brother Arthur was named secondary heir but with no management authority. Since then, Arthur has been pressuring me to sign various documents that would transfer or consolidate control. What kind of documents? Management agreements, joint ownership transfers. He frames them as simplification, tax efficiency, family cooperation. But you haven't signed. No. Good. She opened the folder and began scanning the will. Her eyes moved quickly but deliberately, and twice she made small marks on her legal pad. "Last night," I continued, "Arthur invited me to dinner. There was a man there named Caleb Moore. Arthur introduced him as a family friend helping with legal matters." "Is Moore an attorney?" "No. He said he does estate planning consultation." Her expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. "Did Moore request anything from you?" "Not directly, but Arthur mentioned paperwork that needed my signature. Simple stuff," he said, "and he wants to schedule a meeting next week with just the 3 of us." "No other counsel present?" "Correct." She set down the will and looked at me directly. "What made you call me?" I hesitated, then told her about Lena, the urgency in her voice, the fear. Diane nodded slowly. "Your niece gave you a significant advantage. Most people don't get warnings." "A warning about what, exactly?" She picked up her pen and drew a simple diagram on the legal pad. Estate disputes typically follow one of 3 patterns. First, legitimate disagreement about interpretation. Second, emotional pressure to distribute assets differently than specified. Third, deliberate attempt to circumvent legal authority through fraud or coercion. Which is this? Based on what you've told me, I'd lean toward 3. The presence of an unlicensed consultant, the pressure for informal meetings, the emphasis on handling things without counsel. These are red flags. Something cold settled in my stomach. What would they actually do? Several possibilities. They could present you with documents that look routine but contain buried clauses transferring authority. They could create a paper trail suggesting you agreed to things you never agreed to. They could schedule important filings during windows when you're unavailable, using forged signatures or claiming emergency authority. But I'm the executor. They can't just override that. Not legally, no, but executors can be challenged. If they build a case that you're mismanaging assets, acting against the estate's interests, or failing to fulfill fiduciary duties, they could petition for your removal. That's insane. I've done everything by the book. I believe you, but they only need plausibility, not truth. And if they can delay proceedings long enough, create enough confusion, they might force a settlement that gives them partial control just to end the conflict. I sat back, feeling the weight of it. So what do I do? She flipped to a new page on her legal pad. We document everything. We establish a clear record of your proper management. We identify any attempted filings or actions taken without your authorization, and we prepare defensive measures in case they escalate. What kind of defensive measures? Protective orders against unauthorized access to estate accounts, formal notifications to financial institutions confirming your sole authority, if necessary, a cease and desist to more regarding unauthorized practice. That's going to destroy my relationship with my brother. Your relationship with your brother is already compromised. He's either knowingly attempting fraud or being manipulated by someone who is. Either way, your duty is to the estate and your father's wishes. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing didn't make it easier. How long will this take? I asked. The documentation phase can start immediately. I'll need access to all estate accounts, communications, and records. We should also verify that no preliminary filings have been attempted without your knowledge. How would I know if they have? County records are public. We can check what's been filed under your father's name or properties. That should happen soon, today if possible. I checked my watch. 3:15. The county recorder's office closes at 5, I said. Then we should go now. She stood, already reaching for her coat. 20 minutes later, we were standing at a counter in the county administration building, requesting records related to my father's estate and properties. The clerk was a tired-looking woman with reading glasses on a chain. She typed slowly, squinting at her screen. Okay, I've got 13 documents filed in the past 6 months related to the Trenwick estate. My stomach dropped. 13? Diane's expression remained neutral. Can we see them? The clerk printed them out, one by one. Most were routine, certificate filing, executor appointment, initial inventory. Things I'd filed myself, or that the original estate attorney had handled, but 3 documents made my hands go numb. The first was titled Petition for Co-Management Authority, filed 3 weeks ago. Arthur's name as petitioner, my signature at the bottom. Except I'd never seen that document before, and that wasn't my signature. The second was an emergency access request for estate bank accounts, filed 2 weeks ago. Again, my signature. Again, forged. The third was a notice of intent to sell for 2 of the downtown properties, filed last week, same fake signature. I stared at the papers, the room tilting slightly. I didn't sign these, any of these. Diane examined each document carefully. The signatures are similar, but not identical to your verified signature on the legitimate filings. They're good forgeries, but they're forgeries. What happens now? My voice sounded distant. And now we file fraud reports and get these documents officially invalidated. We also need to contact the court immediately to flag that your authority has been misrepresented. She pulled out her phone and stepped away, already dialing. I stood there holding the forged documents, feeling everything shift. Arthur had done this. Or Arthur and Caleb together. They'd forged my signature, filed false documents, and were systematically building a case to take control of Dad's estate. And if Lena hadn't warned me, I would have walked into their next meeting completely unprepared. I thought about Arthur's text from this morning. Just brothers talking. He'd already filed false paperwork, already set mechanisms in motion. That meeting wasn't going to be a conversation, it was going to be a trap. Me signing something under pressure while they already had a foundation of forged documents to support their claim. Diane returned, her expression grim. I've got an emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. We'll present the forgeries and request immediate protective orders. You need to contact every financial institution connected to the estate and alert them that someone may attempt unauthorized access. What about Arthur? Don't contact him yet. Don't let him know you've discovered the forgeries. He's expecting you to be in the dark. We spent the next hour at her office, drafting notifications and protective filings. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Arthur. Hey, just confirming for next week. Tuesday good for you? Also, Caleb had a thought about those tax implications. We should discuss. Ma is asking when we can all have dinner again. She misses having her boys together. Each message made my jaw tighten. The casual tone, the gentle manipulation, the assumption that I'd just go along. At 6 o'clock, Diane walked me to my car. Go home. Get some rest. Don't respond to any messages from your brother or more, and tomorrow we make this official. Thank you, I said, for believing me. I've been doing this 20 years, Mr. Trenwick. I know what predatory estate actions look like. Your brother made a critical mistake. What mistake? He underestimated you. He saw caution as weakness and thoroughness as passivity. But those traits are exactly what make you dangerous to someone trying to commit fraud. I drove home slowly, processing everything. The streetlights were coming on, casting long shadows across residential lawns. Families were having dinner, kids were doing homework, normal evening routines. My routine had just been blown apart. At home, I made a sandwich I didn't eat and sat at my kitchen table with the forged documents spread in front of me. Arthur's handwriting on the filing forms. Arthur's phone number listed as contact. Arthur, my brother, the person I'd grown up with, had forged my signature and filed false legal documents. Not mistakes, not misunderstandings, deliberate fraud. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Statement of facts regarding attempted estate fraud. I wrote methodically, chronologically, without emotion. Every conversation, every request, every red flag. By midnight, I had 15 pages. I saved it, backed it up to 3 different locations, and finally went to bed. Tomorrow, I stopped being the careful brother who avoided conflict. Tomorrow, I became the executor who enforced the law. The courthouse was cold. That was my first thought as Diane and I walked through security at 7:45 in the morning. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of institutional chill that made you want to keep your coat on. Our hearing was scheduled for 9. Judge Martinez presides over estate disputes, Diane explained as we found seats outside the courtroom. She's fair but strictly procedural. We present the evidence, request protective orders, and let her decide. Will Arthur be here? He hasn't been notified yet. This is an emergency hearing based on suspected fraud. We're requesting orders before the other party can further complicate matters. I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. I'd worn my best suit, navy, conservative, the one I wore to witness important documents, professional armor. At 8:55, a bailiff called our case. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood paneling, a few rows of seats, the judge's bench elevated and imposing. Judge Martinez was already seated, reviewing documents through narrow glasses. She looked up as we approached. Ms. Holloway, Mr. Trenwick, I've reviewed your emergency filing. Let's proceed. Diane stood, her voice clear and measured. Your Honor, Mr. Trenwick is the appointed executor of his father's estate. In the past 3 weeks, 3 documents have been filed with the county recorder bearing Mr. Trenwick's forged signature. These documents attempt to grant co-management authority to Arthur Trenwick and authorize access to estate accounts without proper approval. She presented the documents we'd obtained yesterday, along with exemplars of my legitimate signature. Judge Martinez studied them carefully. Her expression revealed nothing. Mr. Trenwick, these are your authentic signatures. She indicated the legitimate estate filings. Yes, Your Honor. And you did not sign these 3 documents? No, Your Honor. I've never seen them before yesterday. Do you know who filed them? My brother, Arthur Trenwick, is listed as the contact on each filing. Have you confronted your brother about these documents? No, Your Honor. On advice of counsel, I've waited to bring this to the court first. She made a note, then looked at Diane. What are you requesting? Immediate protective orders preventing any party except Mr. Trenwick from filing documents related to the estate. Notification is to all financial institutions that only Mr. Trenwick has authority to access or modify estate accounts, and invalidation of the 3 forged filings. Mr. Trenwick, are you seeking criminal charges against your brother? The question hung in the air. I felt Diane's eyes on me. Not at this time, Your Honor. I want to protect the estate and fulfill my duties as executor. If that requires further action, I'll take it. But my priority is securing the assets my father intended to be managed properly. Judge Martinez nodded. Ms. Holloway, I'm granting temporary protective orders valid for 30 days. The 3 disputed documents are hereby flagged as under investigation and will not be considered valid for any legal purpose. Mr. Trenwick's sole authority as executor is affirmed and protected. Notify Mr. Arthur Trenwick that any further filing attempts without the court's explicit approval will result in contempt charges. She signed several forms with swift efficiency. You'll receive certified copies by end of business today. Anything else? No, Your Honor. Thank you. This court is adjourned. We walked out of the courthouse into brilliant morning sunlight. I felt lightheaded, almost dizzy. That was fast, I said. Martinez doesn't waste time. She sees a lot of estate disputes. She knows fraud when it's presented clearly. Diane checked her phone. I'll file the notifications with the banks this morning. You should expect contact from Arthur by this afternoon. What do I tell him? The truth, that you discovered forged documents and took legal action to protect the estate. You don't need to apologize or explain. You simply enforced your legal authority. She was right, but my hands were shaking. Mr. Trenwick, Brent. She looked at me directly. I know this is your brother. I know this feels like betrayal and conflict and everything you've spent your life avoiding. But you're doing the right thing. It doesn't feel right. Your brother blew things up when he forged your signature. You're just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. We parted ways in the parking lot. She had court filings to process. I had notifications to make. I called the bank first, explained the situation to a manager who'd known my father. She was sympathetic but professional. Yes, they'd received the protective order. Yes, Arthur's access would be blocked immediately. I made 6 more calls. Brokerage firms, property management companies, the business attorney who handled Dad's commercial leases. Each conversation was brief, official, identical. By noon, every financial institution connected to the estate knew that only I had authority, and somewhere, Arthur was finding out that his access had been cut off. My phone rang at 1:47, Arthur's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello? What the hell did you do? His voice was sharp, furious. No pretense of friendliness now. I discovered 3 forged documents filed with the county. I reported them to the court and secured protective orders. Forged? Brent, what are you talking about? Those were drafts. Preliminary paperwork. I was going to review them with you before anything was finalized. They were filed officially with my forged signature. Silence. Then, there must be a mistake. Some administrative error. There's no error. The signatures are forged. I've never seen those documents before, and I didn't authorize any of them. This is insane. Who's been filling your head with this paranoid nonsense? That attorney, Holloway? This isn't paranoia. It's evidence. Evidence of what? That I'm trying to help manage Dad's estate efficiently? Evidence of fraud. The word landed like a stone. You're calling me a criminal? His voice was low, dangerous. I'm calling the documents forged. If you didn't forge them, then someone else did. Either way, I've taken steps to protect the estate. You've taken steps to lock me out, your own brother. I've taken steps to enforce my legal authority as executor. This is exactly what I warned Ma about. You've always been selfish, Brent, hiding behind rules because you're too afraid to actually make decisions. Arthur, you forged my signature. I didn't forge anything. Caleb must have made a mistake with the filing dates. We were still working on those drafts. Caleb isn't licensed to file legal documents. So what? So I made a mistake trusting someone? That makes me a criminal? It makes you responsible for attempting to circumvent proper estate procedures. He exhaled hard. I could picture him, pacing, running his hand through his hair. Okay, he said finally. Okay, let's say there was confusion. Let's say mistakes were made. We can fix this. Come to dinner tomorrow night. Bring Holloway if you want. We'll go through everything together, clear this up. No. No? I'm not negotiating. The protective orders are in place. My authority is confirmed. If you have concerns about estate management, you can file a formal petition through your attorney. I don't have an attorney because I didn't think I needed one, because I thought my brother would act like family instead of an enemy. Family doesn't forge signatures. And family doesn't cut off family without even asking questions first. I asked questions for 6 months. Every time, you deflected. Now I know why. Another long silence. When Arthur spoke again, his voice was different, colder, controlled. You're making a mistake, Brent. A serious mistake. Is that a threat? It's a warning. You think you're protecting the estate? You're about to watch it get torn apart in litigation. I'll file a formal challenge to your competence as executor. I'll present evidence that you've acted against the estate's best interests, that you've mismanaged assets, that you're paranoid and adversarial. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you're even named in the will. You can't rewrite the will. No, but I can drag this through court for years. Cost the estate hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Make sure there's nothing left worth fighting over. My hands went numb. You'd destroy Dad's estate just to hurt me? I'd protect my rights as an heir, whatever that takes. He hung up. I sat in my car, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to empty air. Everything Diane had warned me about was happening. Arthur wasn't backing down. He was escalating. I texted Diane. Arthur called. He's threatening litigation. Her response came immediately. Expected. Don't engage further. Document everything. I drove to the bank and requested copies of all estate account activity for the past 6 months. The manager handed me a thick folder without comment. That night, I spread the statements across my kitchen table and began searching for irregularities. Most transactions were routine, property maintenance, utility payments, taxes. But 3 transfers stood out. $5,000 moved from the main estate account to an account I didn't recognize. Notation, emergency property repair. $7,000 withdrawn as cash. Notation, legal consultation fees. $10,000 transferred to another unfamiliar account. Notation, tax preparation services. None of these transactions had been authorized by me. None had supporting documentation. I pulled up the estate ledger I'd been maintaining and cross-referenced the dates. All 3 transfers had occurred in the 2 weeks before Dad's will was officially probated, a window when things were in administrative flux and oversight was minimal. Arthur had been moving money before I could lock things down. I calculated the total. $22,000 gone. Not estate-destroying amounts, but enough to establish a pattern. enough to show intent. I photographed every statement and forwarded them to Diane with a detailed explanation. Her response came at midnight. This supports our case significantly. Get some sleep. We have work to do tomorrow. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my father's old recliner, the one I'd moved to my house after he passed, and thought about what came next. Arthur had made his choice. He'd chosen control over honesty, entitlement over integrity, and I'd made mine. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note, titled it Next Steps. I began listing every action I needed to take, every document I needed to secure, every institution I needed to contact. I worked until dawn, building a fortress of procedure around my father's estate. Arthur could threaten litigation. He could rage and manipulate and play the wounded brother. But I had something he didn't. I had the law, the truth, and the patience to see this through properly. A week later, Arthur made good on his threat. A petition was filed with the probate court challenging my competency as executor. The document was 37 pages long, filled with accusations. That I'd mismanaged assets, that I'd failed to communicate with other heirs, that I'd acted in self-interest, that I'd unnecessarily escalated family disagreements into legal disputes, that I'd rejected reasonable proposals, that I was temperamentally unsuited for the responsibilities I'd been given. Reading it felt like being taken apart piece by piece. Every decision I'd made, twisted. Every time I'd said no to Arthur, reframed as obstruction. The petition requested my removal as executor and appointment of a neutral third party, or Arthur himself, to assume management duties. I called Diane immediately. I've already reviewed it, she said. It's aggressive, but largely without merit. They're trying to create smoke to suggest fire. What do we do? We respond methodically. We present your detailed records showing proper management. We introduce evidence of the forged documents and unauthorized transfers. We let the court see who's actually acting in the estate's interests. When? Hearing is scheduled 3 weeks from now. That gives us time to prepare a comprehensive response. 3 weeks. 21 days of this hanging over me. Over the next 2 weeks, I received calls from colleagues asking if I was okay because someone had been asking questions about me. My accountant contacted me, confused about a request for my tax records. A former client mentioned that an attorney had contacted her about a notarization I'd done years ago. They were building a case, not based on facts about the estate, but on implications about me. The family group chat exploded. Mom, boys, please. This is destroying me. Can't we sit down and work this out? Arthur, I've been trying. Brent won't return my calls. My cousin Rita. What's going on? Why are lawyers involved? Arthur, Brent has decided he doesn't trust family. He's locked us all out of Dad's estate. Rita, that doesn't sound like Brent. Arthur, people change, especially when money's involved. I watched the messages pile up, not responding. Anything I said would be twisted, but my silence looked like guilt. Finally, I sent one message. I'm following the legal procedures Dad established. If anyone has questions about estate management, they can review the executor reports filed with the probate court. Everything is documented. Arthur. See? Can't even talk to his own family without hiding behind procedure. I closed the chat and didn't look again. A week before the hearing, Lena sent me a text. Uncle Brent, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. I stared at the message. Should I respond? I replied carefully. You did the right thing. Thank you for the warning. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. He's been really angry. Says you betrayed the family. I know. But I heard him talking to Caleb before all this. I know what they were planning. You had to protect yourself. I did. Will you win? I sat with that question. Would I? I hope so, I finally typed. Me too. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed reviewing every document Diane and I would present, every piece of evidence, every response to Arthur's accusations. We had a strong case. But strong cases didn't always win. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my office, pulled out the folder containing my father's original will, and read it again. There was a letter tucked inside, sealed in an envelope marked "For Brent, read when necessary." I'd never opened it, never felt it was necessary. Now I broke the seal. The letter was handwritten, dated 2 weeks before Dad's passing. Brent, if you're reading this, it means things have gotten complicated. I knew they would. I chose you as executor not because you're the oldest or the boldest, but because you're careful. You check your work. You read the fine print. Arthur has many fine qualities, but restraint and patience aren't among them. He'll push boundaries. He'll test limits. He'll convince himself that what he wants is the same as what's right. Don't apologize for stopping him. Your job isn't to make everyone happy. Your job is to do what I asked you to do, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Trust your judgment. Trust the law, and know that I'm proud of you. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times, then carefully placed it back in the envelope. Dad had known. He'd known this exact situation would arise. And he'd chosen me anyway. Not despite my caution. Because of it. The sun came up. I showered, dressed in my best suit, and drove to the courthouse. Diane was already there, organized and calm. Ready? I nodded. Ready. Good, because here comes Arthur. I turned. My brother walked through the courthouse doors with an attorney beside him. Arthur wore an expensive suit and an expression of injured dignity. He looked past me as if I were a stranger. Mom was with him. She met my eyes briefly, her expression pained, then looked away. No Lena. I hoped that meant she was safe. We filed into the courtroom. Judge Martinez presided again, her face impassive. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Arthur's attorney presented his case first. Painted me as paranoid, controlling, resistant to reasonable compromise. Suggested my professional background made me rigid and unable to adapt to family needs. Implied financial mismanagement without concrete evidence. Then it was our turn. Diane methodically dismantled every claim, presented my detailed records showing proper estate management, introduced the forged documents, showed the unauthorized transfers, demonstrated that every decision I'd made was documented and justified. Then she called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Arthur's attorney went after me hard, tried to make my caution sound like paranoia, tried to make my record-keeping sound like obsession, tried to make my refusal to sign unauthorized documents sound like obstruction. But I'd spent 26 years in a profession that required precision and clarity. I answered every question calmly, factually, without emotion. Mr. Trenwick, isn't it true that you've refused to meet with your brother? I've refused to meet informally. I've remained available through proper channels. You don't trust your own brother. I trust legal procedures. That sounds rather cold. It sounds professional. He tried a dozen different angles. None of them stuck. Finally, Judge Martinez called for closing statements. Diane stood. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Brent Trenwick was named executor by his father. He has fulfilled those duties meticulously. When he discovered attempted fraud, he responded appropriately and legally. The petitioner's challenge is not based on actual mismanagement, but on disagreement with proper management. The court should dismiss the petition and affirm Mr. Trenwick's authority. Arthur's attorney stood. Your Honor, this case is about a family being torn apart by one man's unwillingness to compromise. Brent Trenwick has used legal technicalities to shut out his own brother, to deny him access to his rightful inheritance, to turn what should be simple estate administration into a battlefield. We ask the court to recognize that families need flexibility, not rigidity. Judge Martinez made notes, looked at both sides. I'll have a ruling within 48 hours. This hearing is adjourned. We filed out. Arthur didn't look at me. Mom touched my arm briefly as she passed, but said nothing. Diane and I stood in the courthouse lobby. How do you think it went? I asked. I think Judge Martinez saw through the smoke, but until we have the ruling, nothing's certain. I went home and waited. 48 hours felt like 48 years. The ruling came via email at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at my desk when my phone chimed with Diane's message. Ruling is in. Call me. My hands went cold. I stepped outside and dialed. She answered immediately. Brent, we won. I exhaled, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Martinez dismissed Arthur's petition entirely. She found no evidence of mismanagement and noted that your responses to discovered fraud were appropriate and measured. Your authority as executor is fully affirmed. What about the forged documents? She referred those to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. Whether they pursue charges is out of our hands, but it's on record now. I leaned against my car, sun warm on my face. What happens next? Arthur can appeal, but it's unlikely to succeed. Martinez's ruling was thorough. More likely, he'll try to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? Probably requesting increased communication about estate management, maybe quarterly reports beyond what's legally required, face-saving measures that let him claim some degree of involvement. Over the next week, the family group chat deteriorated further. Arthur posted the ruling with his own interpretation. Judge sided with Brent on technicalities. Doesn't change the fact that he's destroyed this family over money. Every word was technically true and completely misleading. I watched the narrative form. Arthur as the wronged brother, me as the paranoid villain hiding behind lawyers. I could have corrected the record, could have posted the forged signatures, the unauthorized transfers, the systematic attempt to circumvent my authority. But what would that accomplish? Instead, I muted the chat and focused on estate administration, filed required reports, managed properties, handled Dad's business affairs exactly as he'd instructed, professional, methodical, careful. Exactly what he'd chosen me for. 2 weeks after the ruling, I received a certified letter from Arthur's attorney. It contained a formal proposal. Arthur would withdraw all challenges to my authority. In exchange, I would provide monthly detailed reports of all estate activities, grant him consultation rights on major decisions, and agree to his presence at all property-related meetings. I sent it to Diane. Her response: classic power-sharing attempt dressed as compromise. You're not required to accept any of this. I wrote back, what's the cost of refusing? Continued family tension, but legally you're protected. I read the proposal again, saw it for what it was. Arthur trying to claw back influence through contractual obligation. I drafted a response. I will continue providing the quarterly reports required by the probate court. Those reports are public record and available to all heirs. I will consider input from all heirs on major decisions, but am not obligated to follow that input. I will not grant special consultation rights beyond those legally required. Diane called when she received my draft. This is going to make him very angry. I know. You're sure? I'm sure. She filed it. Arthur's response came 48 hours later. So it's war then. Fine. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I filed the letter with the rest of the documentation. Then something shifted. Arthur went silent. No more threatening texts. No angry voicemails, just silence. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like the quiet before something breaks. I was right. The first week of December, Arthur started contacting potential buyers for Dad's properties, telling them he could facilitate deals. Then he had Caleb send emails to my property management company claiming authority over maintenance approvals. Each incident was documented. Each was reported. Each time, Diane filed complaints and cease and desist orders. Arthur was probing for weak spots, trying to find ways to maintain influence. Then came the harassment. Anonymous texts from different numbers, packages containing old family photos with bitter notes written in red pen, calls to my workplace. I filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic, but realistic. Unless he explicitly threatens you, there's not much we can do. I left feeling helpless. Mid-December, Lena called. Uncle Brent, can I talk to you in person? We met at a cafe. She looked thinner, tired. Dad and Caleb have been meeting, a lot. I don't know exactly what they're planning, but I've heard things. They're talking about a meeting, something about all the heirs. And Dad keeps saying once everyone sees the full picture, you won't have any choice. What meeting? They're planning to call it directly, some kind of family meeting to discuss the estate. They're going to make it sound optional, but they're preparing something. Lena, if they're planning to present false information, I need specifics. I'll try to find out more, but please, be careful. Dad's desperate. She left shortly after. I called Diane from the parking lot. They're planning something. Lena confirmed they're setting up some kind of confrontation. Good, Diane said. Good? If they're moving toward confrontation, it means they've run out of subtle options. Let them call their meeting. We'll be ready. What if they try something I haven't anticipated? We respond decisively, and this time, we make sure it ends permanently. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. A formal printed card. Annual Trenwick Family Estate Meeting, December 27th, 7 p.m. Arthur Trenwick's residence. All heirs and interested parties invited. I photographed it and sent it to Diane. Her response, don't go alone. Can you come? I'll be there. I spent the days before the meeting preparing, printed comprehensive reports of all estate activities, documented every property management decision, every financial transaction, every communication Arthur had attempted. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was going to present evidence. December 27th arrived cold and clear. Diane met me at 6:30. You ready? She asked. As ready as I'll be. We arrived at Arthur's house at 6:55. Cars filled the driveway and street. Inside, Arthur had transformed his dining room into a conference room. Long table, chairs arranged formally, a laptop connected to a projector screen. Uncle Paul was there. Rita, Mom. Caleb sat near Arthur. Papers spread before him. Arthur stood when I entered. Brent, Glad you could make it. I see you brought your attorney. Ms. Holloway is here to ensure everything remains factual and legal. Everyone took seats. The room felt tense, expectant. Arthur clicked to the first slide of his presentation. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, I want to share information everyone has a right to know. He showed a financial summary of the estate. Dad's estate is worth approximately $4.2 million. Brent was named executor. He controls everything. The rest of us are just along for the ride. That's what Dad's will specified, I said calmly. Yes, but since Brent took over, several concerning patterns have emerged. He clicked to another slide listing allegations. Refused family input, rejected reasonable proposals, escalated discussions into legal disputes. Mr. Trenwick has detailed records of every estate decision, Diane said, all properly documented. Arthur's jaw tightened. The point is that Dad made you executor because he thought you'd be careful, but careful has turned into controlling. I'm proposing we restructure management, create a family committee. Brent maintains executor title, but actual authority is shared. That's not legal, Diane said. The will designates Mr. Trenwick as sole executor. We can if Brent agrees. Arthur clicked to the next slide. My breath caught. It was a bank statement, altered to look like I'd withdrawn $50,000 for personal expenses. Arthur, I said quietly, that document is falsified. Is it, or is it a transaction you hoped no one would notice? Diane stood. You're making false accusations based on altered documents. You're committing fraud in front of witnesses. The room went very quiet. Arthur's expression shifted. Panic flickered across his face. No, I said, standing. We're not continuing with falsified information. I pulled out my folder, copies of authentic bank statements, copies of the forged signatures Arthur had filed, copies of unauthorized transfers, documentation of every attempt Arthur and Caleb had made to circumvent my authority. I set them on the table, one by one. These are the facts. Arthur forged my signature on county documents. He made unauthorized transfers from estate accounts. Tonight, he's presented altered financial documents to manipulate you. I looked at each person, Mom, Paul, Rita. Everything I've done has been by the book. The court already reviewed Arthur's challenge and dismissed it. Judge Martinez affirmed my authority. I turned to Arthur. You forged my signature. You moved estate money without authorization. That's fraud. Arthur stood frozen, his face pale. I pulled out the letter Dad had written, read it aloud, every word about choosing me because I was careful, about Arthur pushing boundaries, about trusting my judgment. When I finished, Mom was crying quietly. Rita stared at Arthur with horror. Dad knew, I said. He knew this would happen. That's why he chose me. I pulled out one more document, placed it in front of Arthur. This is a formal complaint to the district attorney's office regarding document forgery and estate fraud. All the evidence is included. Arthur stared at it, his hands shaking. You're going to admit right now that you forged documents and created false financial records. You're going to agree in writing to cease all attempts to influence estate management, and you're going to repay the $22,000 you transferred. Or what? Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. Or I file this complaint tomorrow morning, and you face criminal charges. The room was absolutely silent. Arthur looked at Caleb. Caleb was already packing his briefcase. Arthur looked at Mom. She turned away. He looked at Paul and Rita. Neither met his eyes. Finally, he looked at me. You'd really do it? You really forged my signature and stole from our father's estate? His face crumpled with rage. I deserved that estate, he said, voice shaking. I'm the oldest. Dad was wrong to choose you. Maybe, but he did choose me. I placed a pen on the agreement Diane had drafted. Sign it, or face the consequences. Arthur's hand trembled as he picked up the pen. He signed. Now admit what you did. I forged your signature. I made unauthorized transfers. I created falsified financial records. I did it because I wanted control. I took the signed agreement and handed it to Diane. Any violation will result in immediate legal action and criminal charges, she said. People stood, gathering coats. No one spoke to Arthur as they left. Caleb was already gone. I walked to the door. Arthur sat alone at his conference table, surrounded by his collapsed schemes. I looked back one last time. He was staring at the signed agreement, his face ashen. I'd won, completely. The estate was protected. Dad's wishes were honored. Arthur's schemes were destroyed. I walked out into the cold December night. Behind me, the door closed on everything Arthur had tried to take. and I felt absolutely gloriously vindicated.